Before this video even starts, for real, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe if you're new, share around to get more people to see this, and in the comments once you're done watching or listening, whichever one you choose to do, let me know in the comments if you want more of these in the future, because you just might get more of them if you do let me know whether you do or don't like these. Thank you to my good friend Nicholas Karitci for helping me with the first ever podcast for this channel. This was an assignment that I had to do for my psychology class, and y'all are getting the full 35, something like that, minutes of this because I wanted to give you guys the whole thing. Apologies for the repetitiveness, but between that and really wanting to dive into this discussion, things got away from us. So I'm gonna have to end up doing a different version because this was only supposed to be like 10 to 15, 20 minutes. And as you can see, we went way over that. And if y'all want that version too, let me know. If not, that's fine, but it's up to you guys. But until then, enjoy talking about depression with Nicholas Karitci. Love you guys, and peace out for now. Enjoy.
Okay, there we are. It's recording.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Elijah Hedgemond, and currently I am on a Zoom meeting with my friend Nick. Today I will be talking about the topic of depression and basically how that affects people and how that might affect both of us in our lives. So, depression is a group of conditions associated with the elevation or lowering of a person's mood. Depression comes, as I think most of us know, in many different forms and can affect people in many different ways. So, in other words, I think it's safe to, say that not everyone deals with depression in the same way, not everyone feels depression in the same way. And then obviously there's also different levels, as in there's clinical depression, mild, major depression. So it comes in different ways, and obviously it can also happen for different reasons. Um, so my question to you
Mm.
is, would you say that can a person have depression without being bipolar?
Um, I wouldn't say so. I would say depression can develop at any stage of life, for anyone. So I wouldn't say that if you don't have bipolar, you wouldn't have depression because they're both two different conditions, and anyone can get depression at any given moment in their lives. In fact, as one in four people will experience a mental health problem at any different moment in their lives anyway. So, to answer the question, no.
Right. And I also know, obviously, like that's also a taboo topic for some people, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. And the way I would see it is, people shouldn't see depression or other mental health conditions as a barrier or a taboo subject because it needs to be spoken about. It needs to be, you know, aware, and people need to be able to seek support when they need it without feeling afraid of barriers and judgments from people. So I would encourage people to seek professional help.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, honestly. Because I know me
Yeah,
personally, that's kind of been a struggle for me. Like I had it for a while, as
yeah.
in like I got the help that I needed, but I can definitely say it took a while for me to trust like who was helping me when they were, and then obviously, unfortunately, not everyone even has the opportunity to get the help they need.
No, that is correct. Especially with the NHS here, especially with lack of funding, unfortunately, which stops people from getting the help that they need. The government cutting mental health services, it impacts people, and so they have to look elsewhere. And another barrier to accessing help is private healthcare, but not everyone will have the money to pay for private healthcare, and so it will lead them into further problems from reaching support as well.
Right. Okay, so I
Yeah,
think another thing that I'm curious about is, and I believe you and I talked about this before, but
yeah,
considering your conditions and
yeah.
what you're going through, would you say that you having autism or anything like that can affect depression and like make it worse at times? Or would you say that's not the case? Or would you say it varies?
I would say yes, it can affect because all mental health conditions are linked and connected in a way. And it, for example, depression, you could be feeling low, and while also having autism or ADHD, you could experience other challenges. For example, not being able to follow directions, not being able to do maths or have confidence within yourself, which would then make you feel depressed, low mood, and other feelings. So I would say all of those conditions are connected with each other in some form of way.
Right, I agree. Would you say that everyone can treat depression in a different way or in the same way, or does it differ depending on the person? So like,
Um, I would say I would say it differs from each individual because not one approach is one size fits all. Uh, Depression affects people in many different ways, so treatment options may be different for all individual people. So I believe people should have a holistic and person-centered approach when dealing with depression because it affects everyone in different ways. So some of the support you can get is cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which helps challenges your thoughts, thinkings, feelings, and emotions. Another form of treatment could be meditation, journey writing, so writing a journal. Um, Another one could be going for walks. So there are different types of treatments that I would say that would help different people when it comes to depression.
I definitely agree with that. And I know even if I don't do it as much as I probably should, me personally, a few years ago I was diagnosed with mild depression. So I know me, kind of like you said, actually.
Yeah.
Journal writings have been something, especially within recently, that I've been doing if I ever felt the need. And then I think just talking about it in general, like
Mm,
that kind of circles back to what was said earlier. That needs to, I think, be something that people, especially now with everything going on, that needs to be something that I think
yeah.
people are just more open to having the discussion about because that
I
is it is a real problem.
Yeah, and especially since COVID-19, that mental health that went up, depression went up, being in lockdown, being isolated, not being able to go out and do things, caused a significant rise in mental health, for a lot of people. That
Right.
mental health services are, overstretched with waiting lists of people that they are, that they're not, that people are not being able to be seen because the waiting lists are too high. So that's another reason why it's really important.
Okay, so for you personally, how much would you say depression affects you in your life? Like when it comes to just how you do things and how you have an outlook on different things.
I would say, especially with low self-esteem for me, I would say it affects me quite a lot. So I wouldn't say every day, I would probably say every other day, once a week, especially with my challenges. For example, not being able to do maths, what was another example? Not always obsessions, you know, not being able to follow directions, not being able to uh, recognize different emotions and feelings. So I would say every other week or every other day. It depends on the day really, because one day you could be feeling happy, the next you could be feeling quite low. So I would say that.
Yeah, and I think that once again kind of goes back to how everyone needs to treat it in a different way because
Mm,
obviously even two people who have like mild depression might not feel it in the same way.
That's correct. Yeah, that is
And
true.
even with that being taboo, that's the other problem. Because then a lot of people aren't willing to, like hear the person out when they actually come forward and say, like, I have this and I need you to understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree on that. And it's quite shocking, really, that it's going up and up and up, and not many people are still seeking support because they, you know, in the past, mental health was treated very differently. It was a problem. People were locked up for having mental health problems.
Hmm.
Um, they were not treated correctly by professionals. They would do experiments on them, so it makes sense why people are still afraid of seeking support or having a diagnosis of mental health because they think it's a weakness, they think it's a crime, they think it's something, a disease, but it isn't. Mental health isn't a crime or a disease. It's an illness that needs to be addressed appropriately and managed appropriately and not seen as a disease or something as a crime.
Completely agree, especially because I think even if we're taking like the professionals and how they treat it out of the equation here, I think the other problem is also just I think there's a generational thing sometimes when it comes to it because kind of
Mm,
like you already said in the past, a lot of people were locked up for even, getting the diagnosis and saying they have it and obviously acting a certain way because they have it. So then,
mm,
that leads in the family sometimes to
that's correct.
some people not even wanting to talk about it because the family may not understand. And then if the family doesn't understand, then you might then run into the situation of, well, if my family doesn't understand, neither are the professionals.
Mm, that is true, and mental health, it can run in families as well. So if your parents have it, then it is possible that you are likely to develop it later in life, depending on what what condition it is. Sometimes that's not always the case.
How often do feelings of depression hit you, and how can you tell when an episode is starting? So, like, if a severe episode starts, do you even think you'd be able to tell, and how would you be able to deal with it?
For me, as we know, I would go into my obsessions. I would say things, for example, I'm rubbish at maths, people are going to give up. Um, you know, I have the thoughts, of, wanting to, be run over, all those thoughts. So I would say when it gets really severe, um, it's not always easy to spot unless the person knows you very well. So I would say it's on an individual basis, maybe for me, every month, week when it gets severe, as we know.
And you're saying, like, when that happens, you would be able to tell when it's going to happen, or?
Sometimes I would say it depends in the moment for me, really, because
Okay,
sometimes it's not always easy for people to notice when these things are happening,
right.
which,
That makes sense.
yeah, yeah,
So this is something that, kind of like you already said, actually, I know for a fact that I'm not always going to be able to tell when it's happening, but I
yeah,
can, sometimes if it's really severe, especially if maybe I've been feeling a certain way that I know I'm not used to feeling all day, then yeah,
yeah,
I can definitely tell like an episode's probably going to happen.
mm, yeah.
But this is something I know personally that I've gotten, and I know for a fact, just based on seeing this a lot of times or hearing it, I should say that I'm not the only one. Has anyone ever called you over dramatic for how you feel when you're feeling depressed?
I would say sometimes people can say you're over exaggerating, you're wanting attention, or you're making a big problem out of it. So I would say sometimes, not always, but it has and can happen, and it has done. So yes, I would say yes.
Yeah, and see, I think that right there is also, again, going back to the taboo issue
Mm,
because
yeah.
if people are told that enough, then that's when they're gonna start being like, well, either A, they're gonna start questioning, like, yeah, am I being over dramatic, or
It's
if you're
also
constantly told that by the people you think you should trust, like then that's kind of where you start shutting down and just are like, okay, now I'm just not going to talk about it.
Yeah, it's also a misconception in depression. A lot of people who don't know or understand depression will have lots of different theories and misconceptions about the condition, and then they will come up with their own minds and start saying things that may not be helpful or accurate or true.
Right. Like I know
Yeah.
I can definitely say, even if it hasn't happened to me a lot, I think one of the worst things you can do to someone who's either having depressed thoughts or, going through actual diagnosed depression
Yeah.
is, kind of end up saying the whole thing of, what could you be depressed about? Or like, how could you feel this way when in that person's mind, like they don't have a reason
Mhm.
for feeling that way?
Yeah.
Because then that right there, in my opinion, that kind of just shows a lack of understanding.
I agree. And also another thing I noticed with people who don't have mental health, and it's quite common really, is when some people can be ignorant to the conditions and say, oh, you should just get over it. It's not a big deal. It's nothing you should worry about. And they often say that because they don't have mental health themselves, when in fact everyone has mental health. It may just not affect them just yet, but everyone does have it. So I think a lot of people can be ignorant sometimes and say, just get over it. There's nothing for you to be worrying about, depressed about, or other things. So that I have experienced.
Yeah, I can definitely say I think at times I have to, because that also goes back to I think what you said earlier about, it's not necessarily that it's not like a disease, but like
Mm,
it is real, because some people obviously if they don't have it are going to sometimes, assume, well, there's no way you could have depression, like there's nothing going on with you. But it's like
mm,
because of that thinking, or because of the simple thinking of, what, like, how could you even have depression? There's nothing wrong with you. You're not depressed, because that's
yeah,
how they're seeing it. Like that's, I think it's either that or the fact that they see it as like an actual problem. And yes, obviously there are ways you can treat depression. Like there's,
yeah,
antidepressants, there's medication for that.
yeah, that's
And then
correct.
counseling helps, but like also it's a thing that I think people need to understand, especially nowadays, because you can definitely see that I think within the recent generations, like it's becoming a lot more prominent for some people.
Yeah, and also another thing I noticed, I don't think a lot of people are aware, they're not aware of the effects to look for in someone who has depression. They don't know the what to look out for, and I think it's really important that they do research and to know that someone is having depression. For example, is the person isolating themselves? Is the person not doing normal activities that they would usually do on a daily basis? Are they not having the motivation to do anything? Not going out the house? So there are, different uh, what's the word? There are different side effects not, to know if someone is having depression. There are different, no, ways to notice these things, and sometimes people are not aware of what to look out for, but the signs are there. If you look very closely, or if you do research, or take time to find out what they are.
Yeah, I can definitely agree. And I think that's what it is. That, like you said, a lot of people don't see the signs, or a lot of people, again, even if they probably know the signs, some of them just are kind of stuck in the mindset
Mm,
of, again, there's nothing wrong with you. But that is an actual thing. Like when you're
mm,
depressed, there's an imbalance in your mind that's causing that for whatever reason. It might be due to something in your past. It might be to something that's going on currently. But that is a real thing. Depression exists.
absolutely. And especially, for example, if you're always being told you can't do something, it's going to decrease your self-esteem. It's going to make you have negative thoughts about yourself. You're never going to believe in yourself because you've always had uh negative thoughts, and there may be other things or reasons as well.
Right. So I know
Yeah.
me personally when it comes to, and this doesn't always work. And obviously it's, it can be different for different people. But for me, when it comes to if I ever do realize I'm in an episode or if, the thoughts just hit me at different occasions, like sometimes it'll happen at night or something.
Yeah,
Usually what I try to do is I try to, go on my phone and maybe look at certain videos that I know are going to get me out of that mindset, or if it's not too late, I'll try to talk to people that I
yeah.
know aren't going to keep me in that mindset. So when it comes to coping, for you, how hard is it to cope with your depression, and do you ever find it impossible to get help?
I would say sometimes I can find it difficult, especially when I'm, have the mindset that people are not interested, they don't care. So because of my obsessions and the depression linked together, it would make me feel um, that I should go into the obsessions and argue back with people. So I would say it can affect me in that way, and not being able to seek support right away can be problematic for me as well. And another thing that I think people often forget to mention is that there is also another type of depression called seasonal affective disorder, and
Hmm.
that's another type of depression where it happens throughout all the different seasons. And for example, there's winter, spring, summer, autumn. There's different types of depressions in those seasons, and they can also affect people um, throughout that time as well. So that's another thing that I wanted to add as well that people need to be aware of.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. Because I also know, obviously, like whether it's the season itself, maybe some people just don't feel right in that season, or it could be great example. I know a lot of people around maybe Christmas. Like I think it's actually been proven that around Christmas, a lot of people feel more depressed than anything because
Yeah,
maybe they lost a loved one, or maybe they don't have a family to spend Christmas with. So obviously, that is something that does
yeah.
exist, and I think
Mm.
people knowing that, it would probably also help a bit to be able to diagnose people that way, and also be able to help them cope with it if they find a way to do so.
Yeah, and especially going back to Christmas, yeah, for example, people can be isolated, people could be grieving, people could be, they may not have anyone with them, they might live far away, so there are lots of reasons as to why it would happen more during that time as well, because Christmas isn't a happy time for everyone, as we know.
Right. And I think for that reason, like we kind of already covered, there's a lot of different depressions. There's,
Mm,
clinical depression, there's major depression, which, that can be really hard for people. There's mild
yeah,
depression, there's seasonal. I think one, just knowing that there's so many different ones, 'cause I think a lot of people don't always recognize
yeah.
that either.
And they're all different. They're not all the same. So, and that's another thing that people need to be aware of is that depression, they're not all the same. They're all different conditions because it's like a spectrum, uh, so, and
Right.
people need to be aware of that.
And then obviously, again, some of the signs might be the same, but not everyone's going to, show the same signs, or not everyone's going to be affected the same, so they might act differently because of it.
Mm. Yeah,
I
I
think the
do
fact that
agree.
it's a taboo topic is also the problem for that reason, though.
Yeah. How do you think we can, address the taboo subject and, raise awareness to people about depression?
I think, so me personally, and this is something that I know is hard for even me to do, but I think opening the floor to having these conversations is something that would be really helpful, because I think, like, when I say it's taboo, right? Maybe it's taboo because of maybe in your school people don't, feel comfortable talking to a counselor, or maybe at home
Yeah.
your family, like we discussed, they're always saying, like, you don't have depression, or you could never have depression because maybe,
Mm.
I don't know, maybe there's a thing where you're really rich and you have a
Yeah.
lot of money, you have everything you want, whether it's valuable or not. Your parents spend time with you, so there's no way that you could possibly be depressed, but that's not really how that works.
No, that's another misconception that people think about. Yeah, people who have rich, who are famous, who are celebrities, they can still get mental health, and they do, and it's been proven and shown. So, yeah, that's another misconception um, that people have. And I think another way to, raise awareness about depression and other mental health conditions is doing support groups, online groups, like, podcasts, peer support groups. And another thing I notice a lot is men, especially men with depression, they are afraid to speak out because of masculinity and society expectations on, you know, that men don't cry. There's, all those sort of stereotypes that people face, which is another reason why men may not speak out compared to women. And I think that also needs to change as well.
I agree. Because, yeah, I think it's not right for it to happen, but I think the way society works, especially now, if a woman comes out and says like they're having depression or they're feeling depressed, it
Mm,
seems to be accepted more. But if a man says it, all of a sudden, well, if you have depression and you're a man, you're not being strong, you're not doing what you're
yeah.
supposed to do, you're seen as weak.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's not really how that works. The way I view it, actually, even if I don't always, use this in my personal life, I'm trying to get better at that. But the way I view it, if you're a man and you have depression, if you're able to talk about it, I think honestly that makes you stronger because you're able to say that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, I do agree on that, and I think, you know, for example, that's why there should be men's support groups, peer support groups, online groups, you know, more awareness, for example, like we're doing now. So I do think, yeah, that needs to change. I do agree with you.
I do think altogether, kind of like, everything I was already said, depression, bottom line, it is real. It does
Mm,
exist. And unfortunately, I think, especially due to, the pandemic and then everything that's even still currently going on, like a lot of people are definitely feeling it right now.
mm,
And
yeah,
I think opening that floor to just, even if you don't talk about it every day, opening the floor to even being able to talk about it at all is
yeah,
something that I think is definitely important. You don't even have to talk to your family. Like if you don't, excuse me, if you don't genuinely feel comfortable doing that, well, one, I would say maybe try to find a way to get more comfortable doing that. But if you
yeah,
don't think that's possible, at least have one person that you can go to and talk to them about it. Just
yeah,
because having that conversation, it's a lot better than just keeping it all inside. If you keep it all inside,
yeah.
that can lead to a lot of bad things happening.
I do agree, and I would encourage people to speak to friends and say, I'm here for you to speak to if you want to. So yeah, speaking to friends is a good one, as well. If you can't speak to family or professionals, at least try and speak to someone rather than keep it to your self. And because ultimately, if you don't, it can become problematic. And also with depression, there's lots of reasons why people are, may be feeling that way. For example, the cost of living crisis that is affecting um, a lot of people at the moment. People who may be in debt, people who, may not be able to, who are on waiting lists for hospital appointments. It can make them feel a certain way. So, they should take those factors into consideration as well.
Right. So I think also, like, I think the main point that everyone should get from this is depression comes in many different ways.
Mm,
People can feel depressed for different reasons. Don't
yeah,
don't make them feel like they don't have a voice. Don't invalidate them and say like, you can never be depressed because you have this. Even if you're not rich or poor or anything, even if we're taking all of that out of the equation, if someone's
yeah,
genuinely feeling depressed and they try to come to you, don't brush them off and just say, there's no way that could happen to you because you're
Yeah.
not in their head. You don't really know what's going on.
That is correct. Yeah, people often assume that they're mind readers and that they can read other people's minds, but that is just not the case, and it's not helpful. And I think a lot of people they struggle with empathy. So, especially in those moments. So instead of saying, "Oh, you're not depressed," they should put themselves in that other person's shoes for a moment and think about how they were feeling rather than becoming, judgmental.
Yeah, I definitely agree because I think
Yeah.
honestly, if you open the floor to have that conversation, you try to be open minded about it. I think honestly, I feel like you might see a change in society as a whole if you really do that. Because
Yeah,
I'm not gonna say everyone is like that because I know for a
no,
fact that's not the case. But for the people who are like that, understand that that's also causing things down the line to become worse. Because if you
yeah,
teach someone that way or if you have that mindset toward them, then I think it's safe to say that if that happens to them as a kid, even, right, they're going to grow up feeling invalidated. So then they might start doing that to other people. It's not that they want to, but that's all they're used to doing. And that's all
yeah,
they're used to feeling.
yeah. But yeah, that is true because they do say, um, our past shapes who we are today, the environment we grew up in, the people we grew up in, which is also known as psychoanalytical theory. So, and how we are in our earlier life will affect us later in life if it's not, um, dealt with or addressed or managed appropriately. It can affect the person.
Right. So I think
Yeah,
all in all, open the floor to conversations. Don't be afraid to seek help. You're not weak for
no,
doing that at all. You're helping yourself. And then, if anything, by helping yourself, you're also helping those around you.
yeah, absolutely. And you're raising awareness, and it also shows that yeah, people may say all those things, but you're doing the right thing for you, and that is all that matters, really.
In the end of the day, yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah,
Especially
and
because if you want to help anyone else, you need to help yourself first. If you're not
yeah,
helping yourself, you're eventually not going to be able to help anyone else because you might, be too surrounded by what you're feeling to really be in the right mindset to help
mm.
anyone.
Yeah, there's a saying, which goes like this: you can't help someone if you don't help yourself first. You have to put the oxygen on yourself before you can help someone else. Otherwise,
Definitely agreed.
you won't be able to. And that's
Yeah.
something that I often need to remember for myself. If I don't help or work on myself, then I can't help others. And that's something that I must remember as well. And that's something I think we often forget about is when we want to help others, we often put others first and forget about us.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Um,
Yeah,
I would say for the most part, yeah, I think that's everything. So just overall, just remember these are real topics. People can
yeah,
feel them for multiple different reasons, and it's okay to not be okay. It's
yeah,
okay to feel, any other way that isn't from what people think is the normal. As long as you're able to get help for it and you're able to, really find a way to truly get help in the end of the day, I
yeah.
think honestly that's what's most important.
Absolutely, and also, trying to be yourself is also important, rather than trying to be someone that you're not is important, I would say.
hmm
Yeah, definitely, because that's what a lot of people do. They try and be others and not themselves at times.
And I think that's where that starts, becoming a bit of a problem. That's exactly why a lot of people I think need to, kind of like we already said, help themselves first and realize that it's okay to help themselves. It's okay to be, when it comes to your mental health,
Yeah,
obviously don't, go through life completely being selfish, but it's okay to
no,
be selfish when it comes to your mental health because if you're not,
yeah.
then you're never going to be in the right place. And that's not something that I think anyone should have to go through.
Yeah, I do agree absolutely with that. And to also remember that there are some people out there who do care and who do want to help, and that not everyone is going to be that way where they don't want to help or they're going to say horrible things.
And I think with that, we can, I believe, end it here. Thank you again, Nick, for joining me, and thank you for being honest and open and being willing to answer all these questions.
No problem. I will stop the recording and save it.